it's Fiona Masterson from the Learning Reservoir. In this video, I'm going to explain to you what Pharma CGMPs are. GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Practices, and they are the practices that are required in order to conform to the guidelines recommended by agencies that control the authorization and licensing of the manufacture and the sale of food and beverages, cosmetics, pharmaceutical products, dietary products and medical devices. And this video we're looking at pharmaceutical products, the GMP, cGMP requirements for when you are manufacturing a pharmaceutical product. You have to do certain good manufacturing practices. And why are cGMPs so important to a pharmaceutical company? Well, if you think of a drug, when you use a drug, you can't tell by looking at it if it's safe to use and that it will work. Therefore, testing alone is not adequate always to ensure quality of the drug. Because testing is destructive in nature, it is not practical to test every single pill or vial to determine if it's safe for the patient to use. Therefore, you need to have a foundation of good practices, manufacturing practices in place to ensure that how that drug is designed and manufactured is done in a good manner, in a hygienic way, for example, in an environment that is suitable for the manufacture of that drug. Those are good manufacturing practices. And complying with cGMP regulations is mandatory if you are manufacturing a drug. So where do the regulations around cGMPs come from? So in other words, what are the practices you have to put in place if you're manufacturing a drug? Well, they come from a number of different sources. cGMP practices information is found and requirements are found in laws, in regulations and in guidance documents created by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The principal law in the US is the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, and within that, in section 501, it talks about adulterated drugs, and this is taken directly from that law, and it states in the law, a drug shall be deemed adulterated if the methods used in or the facilities or controls used for its manufacturer, processing, packing or holding do not conform to or are not operated or administered in conformity with current good manufacturing practices. So in layman's language, what that means is if a drug is not manufactured or processed or packed or held in a facility that is in conformance with the correct way of manufacturing it, the current good manufacturing practices, that drug is deemed to be adulterated. So GMP are mandatory regulations, and the C means current. That's what that stands for. The FDA are the body that enforces the regulation. They are an agency that employs civil and criminal investigators, auditors, attorneys and other type of enforcement professionals. And they are the people who investigate drug manufacturers to ensure that they have manufactured their drug in accordance with FDA regulations, and to check to ensure that there are no violations of cGMP regulations. So what are the practical sides to GMP, good manufacturing practices? If you're working in a pharmaceutical company, you need to know the practical aspect of GMP. So what are they? Well, the cGMP regulations are requiring you to have adequately equipped manufacturing facilities, have adequately trained personnel, have precisely controlled manufacturing processes, have appropriate laboratory controls in place, have records for all your laboratory controls that are in place, and reports of your laboratory analysis and testing and so on, have appropriate finished product examination and other things like that. We've seen this before, this text. Where do the cGMPs come from? Well, they come from our laws. We saw the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act talks about the requirements to have good manufacturing practices in place when you're manufacturing drugs. And then we had our regulations, and then the FDA write guidance documents, where I'm going to show you here some regulations that are very important if you're implementing cGMP practices. But first of all, what are regulations? Well, they are based on the laws. So the regulations for cGMP are based on the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, and they are published when they are approved in a document called the Federal Register and in the Code of Federal Regulations, and it is abbreviated to the CFR. And the regulations that relate to the cGMP of drugs are the 21 CFR 210 and 211, the 21 Code of Federal Regulations 210 and 211. And what does it say in those regulations? Well, within those regulations, it describes what you have to have in place. Here, this text comes directly from 21 CFR 210, and it states here that the regulations set forth in this part and in these other parts of this chapter contain the minimum current good manufacturing practices for methods to be used and the facilities or controls to be used for the manufacture, processing, packing and so on for a drug. So if you have to implement cGMPs in a drug manufacturing facility, you need to be familiar with 21 CFR 210 and 21 CFR 211, the cGMP for finished pharmaceuticals, states that the regulation in this part contains the minimum current good manufacturing practices for preparation. And then this is also a regulation that you should be familiar with if you're working in the area of drug manufacturing. To conclude this video, adherence to the cGMP regulations should ensure that the identity, strength, quality and the purity of our drug product. That is why we have to implement them. And the whole idea is that by implementing cGMPs, it will ensure that manufacturers would have control around the manufacturing operations of their drug. That concludes this video. I hope you found it beneficial. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel.